The world of magic doesn't end with the turning of a page. Love rises and falls anew, forbidden like poison or blazing like a phoenix's flame. The heroes we thought we knew uncover their hearts once more. So step into the enchantment of emotion and welcome to a world where love is written anew. The night was thick with fog, the kind that swallowed sound and sight, wrapping the world in a damp, uneasy silence. Somewhere beyond the grey mist, battle cries echoed, sharp, desperate, fleeting. Hermione Granger's heart pounded as she crouched behind a shattered stone wall, clutching her wand in trembling fingers. The air reeked of smoke and burning earth. Spells hissed through the darkness, flashes of green and red lighting the landscape like sudden lightning. They had been ambushed. Harry had shouted for her to run. She remembered the terror in his voice, the way Ron's hand had briefly caught hers before a curse tore them apart. Now she was alone, breathless, her mind racing for the next move. Apparition was impossible here. The Death Eaters had sealed the area. A sound, the crack of a twig, made her whip around. A shadow moved in the mist. "Expelliarmus!" she cried. But before the spell left her wand, something stronger hit her. Her world exploded into white light. When she woke, her head was pounding and her wrists were bound with coarse rope. The air smelled of polished wood and perfume, and something darker beneath, the faint metallic tang of fear. She tried to move, and a voice, cool and unmistakably aristocratic, spoke from the shadows. "I wouldn't struggle, Granger. The ropes are charmed." Hermione's eyes adjusted, and her breath caught. The figure before her stepped into the light. Pale, pointed face, grey eyes like storm clouds, and the faintest trace of a smirk. "Malfoy!" she spat. Draco Malfoy inclined his head as if greeting a guest, though there was a tension in his shoulders she'd never seen before. "Welcome to Malfoy Manor," he said softly. "It seems you're our guest of honor." Her heart lurched. The room was high-ceilinged, cold, the walls lined with portraits that watched silently from gilded frames. She'd read about this place in The Prophet, the Death Eaters' headquarters, Voldemort's chosen stronghold. Hermione's throat went dry. "Where are Harry and Ron?" "I wouldn't worry," Draco replied, though his voice wavered slightly. "They escaped." It wasn't reassurance. It was resignation. The door opened behind him, and Bellatrix Lestrange swept in, all wild hair and glittering madness. "Our little mudblood is awake," she sang, circling Hermione like a cat around a mouse. "I was hoping I'd get to have some fun before the Dark Lord calls for her." Draco stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Aunt Bellatrix, my father said she's not to be touched." Bellatrix's eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. "Oh, did he now? And since when do you take orders from anyone but the Dark Lord, dear boy?" Hermione saw it then, the flicker of panic behind Draco's mask. His arrogance was still there, but it was cracked, fragile. Bellatrix left with a cruel laugh, but not before dragging a finger along Hermione's cheek. "Soon, little mudblood," she whispered. "Soon." When the door closed, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Draco turned away, his hands clenched at his sides. "Why are you doing this?" Hermione demanded. "You don't have to be a part of this." He laughed, short and bitter. "You think I have a choice? You think any of us do?" Hermione's voice softened despite herself. "There's always a choice." Draco looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression faltered. Not here, he said quietly. The hours crawled by. Hermione didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. She could hear faint voices through the walls. Lucius Malfoy's clipped tones, Bellatrix's shrill laughter, and somewhere deeper, colder, the echo of Voldemort's command. When Draco returned later, he carried a tray of food. She eyed it suspiciously. "It's not poisoned," he said, setting it down. "Believe me, if they wanted you dead, they wouldn't bother with poison." Hermione met his gaze. "Then why am I still alive?" He hesitated. Because the Dark Lord wants information." Her stomach twisted. She'd prepared herself for torture, for pain. She knew what Death Eaters did to prisoners. But now, sitting in the flickering candlelight across from Draco Malfoy, she was struck by something unexpected, the weariness in his face. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't sneering. He looked trapped. "Eat," he said quietly. "You'll need your strength." Hermione didn't move. "Why are you helping me?" "I'm not," he said sharply, though his voice lacked conviction. "I'm following orders." He turned to leave, but she caught his sleeve. For a moment, they both froze. Her touch light, his breath quick. Then he pulled free, his mask back in place. "You shouldn't trust anyone here," he muttered. "Especially me." When he left, Hermione's pulse still raced. The manor seemed alive around her, breathing, watching. The portraits whispered. The candles flickered in the drafts. Somewhere below, she heard a scream. Distant, muffled, but unmistakably real. She drew her knees to her chest and tried to think of Harry and Ron, of freedom, of hope. But as exhaustion claimed her, one image lingered in her mind. Not Bellatrix's grin or Voldemort's cold eyes, but Draco's, clouded and uncertain, as though he hated himself as much as the world he was trapped in. Outside, the fog thickened over the manor's iron gates, and the night deepened. Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, was now a captive in the heart of darkness, watched over by the last person she ever thought might save her. And somewhere deep inside the walls of Malfoy Manor, fate had already begun to stir. The morning in Malfoy Manor dawned grey and cold. Sunlight filtered through tall, arched windows, casting pale bands across the marble floor. Hermione woke to the sound of footsteps in the corridor, measured, deliberate, echoing softly like a heartbeat in the vast silence. She had dreamed of running through a forest filled with mist, through shadows that whispered her name. But the cold stone beneath her cheek reminded her that this was no dream. She was still here, a prisoner. The door creaked open. Draco Malfoy entered again, his expression carefully neutral, his robes immaculate. He carried no tray this time, only a folded blanket and a small glass vial that shimmered faintly with a golden hue. "Drink this," he said shortly, placing the vial on the table beside her chair. "It's a restorative potion. You hit your head when they captured you." Hermione eyed it warily. "You expect me to trust anything you give me?" He sighed, not the sigh of arrogance she remembered from school, but one of bone-deep weariness. "If I wanted to harm you, I wouldn't waste time with potions." Reluctantly, she lifted the vial. The liquid inside tasted faintly of honey and mint, and warmth spread through her chest almost immediately. Her headache dulled. The stiffness in her shoulders eased. Draco crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. "You'll be moved downstairs later today. The Dark Lord doesn't want you kept in the guest chambers. Her eyes narrowed. Guest chambers. How generous. He ignored the sarcasm. My mother thinks you'll freeze in the cellar. She's trying to convince my father otherwise. Hermione blinked, momentarily thrown. Narcissa Malfoy cares whether I freeze. His jaw tightened. She cares about appearances, and she doesn't like Bellatrix lingering near you. Hermione set the vial down. Why? For a moment, something flickered in Draco's expression. Unease, perhaps? Because my aunt enjoys breaking people, and my mother doesn't. That was all he said. Hours passed slowly, the manor's silence pressing against her ears. From time to time, Hermione caught faint whispers outside the door. Bellatrix's laughter, Lucius's measured voice, and once, unmistakably, Narcissa's cool tones, low and warning. When the door opened again, it was Narcissa who entered. Hermione straightened instinctively. The woman's beauty was like ice, elegant, cold, untouched by the chaos swirling around her home. She held herself with the composure of someone used to being obeyed. "My son tells me you've refused food," Narcissa said, her gaze sharp but not cruel. "I don't eat what Death Eaters offer me," Hermione replied evenly. Narcissa's lips curved, not in amusement, but something faintly resembling pity. "You're very brave, or very foolish." Hermione met her eyes. Maybe both. A long silence followed. Then Narcissa set a loaf of bread and a jug of water on the table. "No one will harm you tonight," she said softly. "But in this house, survival depends on silence. Speak only when spoken to. Look down when Bellatrix enters. And whatever you do, do not lie to the Dark Lord. He will know." Hermione swallowed, her throat dry. "Why are you telling me this?" Narcissa's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "Because I have a son," she murmured. Then she turned, her robes whispering across the floor, and left as silently as she'd come. That night, the manor changed. The air grew colder. Even the portraits seemed to hold their breath. From somewhere below came the unmistakable voice of Voldemort, low, hissing, threaded with command. Hermione froze where she sat, every instinct screaming to run, though there was nowhere to go. Footsteps approached again, quick and uneven. The door opened to reveal Draco, his face pale. "You're being moved," he said. "Now." Before she could reply, two masked Death Eaters entered. Hermione's heart pounded as they untied her wrists and dragged her into the corridor. The manor's halls stretched endlessly. High arches, silver chandeliers, portraits that turned away as she passed. The walls seemed to hum faintly, alive with enchantment. Somewhere, a clock struck midnight. They stopped before a heavy iron door near the cellar steps. Draco gestured for them to wait, then whispered something under his breath. The others hesitated, glancing at him uncertainly. He pulled rank with quiet authority that surprised Hermione. "I'll take her from here," he said. "My father's orders." The Death Eaters hesitated, then nodded reluctantly and withdrew. Hermione turned to him, suspicion mingling with confusion. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer. He unlocked the door and motioned for her to enter. Inside was a small chamber, not a dungeon exactly, but far from comfortable. A narrow bed, a single candle, a barred window too high to reach. Yet compared to the cold stone below, it was a kindness. "I can keep them from hurting you for a while," Draco said quietly. "But I can't promise more than that." Hermione looked at him, searching his face. Why help me at all? He hesitated. Because I don't want to see another person destroyed in this house. Their eyes met, hers sharp, questioning, his uncertain, almost pleading. Then, with a quiet click, he shut the door behind him. The days that followed blurred together. Hermione saw Draco often, sometimes bringing food, sometimes books, sometimes nothing but silence. Their conversations were few but heavy with unspoken meaning. He never once used the word mudblood. Once, she asked him about Hogwarts, what it felt like to walk through the castle now, patrolled by Death Eaters and fear. He didn't answer at first. Then, after a long pause, he said, "It doesn't feel like Hogwarts anymore." That night, Hermione couldn't sleep. The wind moaned through the manor, and she thought she heard whispers, faint, echoing, impossible to locate. The portraits, she suspected, carried secrets, their painted lips moving when no one watched. Somewhere near dawn, the door creaked open again. Draco stepped inside, his face pale, his movements tense. "They're questioning a muggle-born down the hall," he whispered. "Bellatrix is enjoying herself. If anyone asks, you haven't spoken to me." Hermione's chest tightened. "Why tell me this?" He hesitated, his voice barely audible. "Because you should know what's coming. And because you remind me that not everyone here deserves what's happening." For the first time she saw it, the fracture in his mask, the boy beneath the arrogance, terrified and human. He turned to go, but paused at the door. "Granger," he said softly, "if you ever get the chance to escape, take it. Don't hesitate." And then he was gone, leaving Hermione alone in the dim candlelight, her thoughts tangled in fear and confusion. She pressed her hands together, whispering to herself, a habit from long nights of study and strategy. "There's always a way," she murmured. "Always." But as she listened to the echoes of distant screams and the wind sweeping through Malfoy Manor's endless halls, she wasn't sure if she believed it anymore. Days in the manor passed like ghosts drifting through endless corridors, silent, uncounted, and cold. Hermione soon lost track of time. The sun rose and fell somewhere beyond the barred window, but its light barely touched the stone walls of her small chamber. Every sound carried, the creak of the staircase, the clatter of dishes far away, and the faint whisper of voices from rooms she would never see. She told herself she was strong. She repeated it like a spell, over and over, whenever her courage began to waver. But there were moments, brief and sharp, when she wondered whether her friends even knew she was alive. Her thoughts were interrupted one morning by a quiet knock. The door opened and Draco entered again, a folded parchment in his hand. He looked as though he hadn't slept in days. The skin beneath his eyes was pale and bruised with exhaustion. He didn't speak at first. He stood by the door as if gathering strength. Finally, he said, "The Dark Lords called for an audience tonight, not with you, yet, but with my father. When that happens, Bellatrix gets restless." Hermione frowned. "Restless? She'll want someone to amuse herself with." His tone was low, edged with fear. "And when she does, she'll look for you." Hermione felt her pulse quicken. "Then I'll fight," she said firmly. "I won't just sit here and—" He stepped closer, his voice suddenly sharp. "No, you can't fight her. You don't understand. She'll kill you just for the sport of it. You have to let me handle this." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt charged, alive with unspoken things. Hermione saw his hand tremble before he tucked it behind his back. She took a breath. "And why, Malfoy?" she asked softly. "Would you risk anything to save me?" He didn't meet her eyes. "Because if I don't, my mother will suffer for it. She's already walking a dangerous line." Hermione wanted to believe him, but there was more to his words, something he didn't say. She sensed it in the way his voice faltered, the way he couldn't quite look at her. "Do what you have to," she said finally, "but I won't beg." Draco gave a short, bitter laugh. "I didn't think you would." That night, the manor stirred like a living creature. Hermione heard footsteps echoing through the halls, sharp commands, the thud of boots against marble. She sat on the edge of her bed, wandless, straining to listen. Then came the scream. It was distant yet distinct, a woman's voice, high and breaking. Hermione froze. Another scream followed, and then laughter, wild, cruel, unmistakable. Bellatrix. The door flew open. Draco burst inside, breathless. "You have to move. Now!" "What's happening?" Hermione asked. "She's on her way here. I told her father forbade it, but she's furious." Hermione stood, her hands shaking. "Where can I go?" He didn't answer. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the corridor. They ran, past portraits that turned their faces away, past cold walls that seemed to hum with enchantments. The manor was a maze of shadows, but Draco moved with certainty, his grip firm, his stride long. At last, they reached a narrow servants' passage, hidden behind a tapestry. He pushed her through and closed it quickly behind them. The air inside was musty, thick with dust. A single candle flickered weakly on the stone floor. "Stay here," he whispered. "Don't make a sound." "Draco, please." The word broke from him before he could stop it. His voice trembled. "Just trust me." And then he was gone. Hermione stood alone in the dark passage, listening to the muted chaos outside. Footsteps thundered down the hall, and Bellatrix's shrill voice rang out. "Where is she, Draco? Don't think you can hide my prize." Hermione pressed a hand to her mouth, willing her breath silent. She could hear them, Bellatrix's laughter, Draco's replies, low and controlled. She couldn't make out the words, but she could hear the danger in every syllable. Minutes or hours passed. Then, at last, the noise faded. The manor settled into uneasy quiet once more. When the hidden door creaked open again, Draco looked worse than before. A thin line of blood marked his temple. His breathing was uneven. "She's gone," he said quietly. "For now." Hermione stared at him. "What did you tell her?" "That you were moved to the dungeons, that father wanted to keep you for the Dark Lord's arrival." He swallowed. "She believed me. Barely." "You lied to her for me," Hermione whispered. He gave a hollow smile. "Seems I'm good at lying these days." They stood in silence. The candle between them guttered, throwing long shadows against the wall. For the first time, Hermione noticed how thin he looked, how the proud lines of his face seemed carved by sleepless nights and fear. "Why do you stay?" she asked quietly. "You could run." His laugh was bitter. "Run where? Every door in this place is locked by blood magic, every window warded. And even if I did escape, they'd find me. They always find traitors." Hermione's gaze softened. "You're not a traitor." He looked at her then, eyes grey and sharp as broken glass. "Aren't I? I swore loyalty to the Dark Lord. I watched him kill people, and I did nothing. That makes me worse than a coward." Hermione shook her head. "You still have a choice." He stared at her as though the idea itself was foreign. Then, quietly, he said, "Maybe you'll remind me what that feels like." The words hung between them, fragile as glass. Neither moved. Then, with a sigh, Draco extinguished the candle. "You should rest. I'll bring food tomorrow." But Hermione couldn't sleep. She lay awake, her mind churning with everything she'd seen. His exhaustion, his fear, the desperate kindness in his voice. She hated herself for the flicker of sympathy she felt. When dawn came, pale and cold, she rose and went to the narrow window. The mist outside had lifted, revealing the bleak gardens below, overgrown, forgotten. For the first time since her capture, she saw a hawthorn tree by the edge of the grounds, its white blossoms trembling in the breeze. She pressed her palm against the glass and whispered, "There's still hope." Behind her, the door opened softly. Draco stood there, holding a small loaf of bread. He hesitated before speaking. "Eat," he said, but his tone was gentler this time. "You'll need strength for what comes next." Hermione turned to face him. "And what comes next?" He met her gaze. "War," he said quietly, "and choices." And though she didn't yet know it, that day would be the one that changed both their lives forever. The manor never slept. Even when its inhabitants did, its stones seemed to breathe, the walls whispering in the dark, the floors groaning with ancient memory. Hermione had begun to understand the rhythm of it, the way silence thickened just before danger, the way cold air seemed to curl through the corridors before Bellatrix appeared. The night after Draco's warning, Hermione lay awake again. Her candle had burned low, and the room was painted in dim amber light. She could hear rain striking the window pane, steady and relentless. For a moment, it was almost comforting, almost normal, until the echo of voices rose below. She strained to listen. Lucius Malfoy's sharp tones cut through the murmur. "You're playing a dangerous game, Draco. Do you think I don't see it? The Dark Lord notices everything." Draco's voice followed, low but steady. "Then let him notice. I'm following orders, nothing more." "You're a poor liar," Lucius snapped. "You've grown soft. That girl—" Hermione froze. "She's clouding your judgment." There was silence, then a sound like a glass shattering. Draco's reply came after a long pause, quieter, colder. "You think I'd risk our family for her? Don't insult me." But there was something in his voice, something Lucius didn't hear, but Hermione did, the faint tremor of truth. When the voices faded, Hermione sat back against the wall, heart pounding. She told herself it didn't matter. Draco Malfoy was not her ally, not her friend. But the world had grown stranger than she ever imagined, where enemies could save lives and heroes could die unseen. The next morning, her door opened again. Draco entered with his usual composure, though his right hand bore a thin cut that glistened red along his knuckles. "You're bleeding," Hermione said before she could stop herself. He glanced at it dismissively. "It's nothing." "What happened?" "Family disagreement," he replied, setting down a tray of food. "Nothing you need to worry about." He turned to go, but she spoke again. "You shouldn't let him do that to you." Draco paused. "You think I can stop him?" "You're not a child anymore," she said quietly. "You could stand up to him." He gave a mirthless laugh. "You really don't understand, Granger. In this house, standing up gets you buried." Hermione's gaze softened despite herself. She could see now how his shoulders carried the weight of expectation, how every movement seemed measured, as though one wrong word might shatter what little safety he had left. When he left, she noticed he hadn't locked the door. It was only a crack, barely enough to tempt her, but it was freedom all the same. Her mind raced. Could it be deliberate, a trap, or something else? She waited, counting heartbeats, listening for footsteps. None came. At last, she pushed the door open and stepped into the corridor. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of rain. Candles flickered along the walls, casting shadows that swayed and stretched like living things. She moved quietly, her bare feet soundless on the marble floor. Every corner seemed alive with danger. The portraits followed her with their eyes, whispering softly to each other. Somewhere in the distance, she heard laughter, high and cruel, and she froze, pressing herself into a dark alcove until it faded. She reached a staircase leading downward and paused. At the bottom, she glimpsed the faint glimmer of silver, Lucius's cane. Her breath caught. She turned and fled back the way she came, pulse racing. She nearly collided with Draco as he rounded a corner, his wand half drawn. "What are you doing?" he hissed. Hermione's heart hammered. "You didn't lock the door." "I know." His voice was tight. "I was testing you, and you failed." She bristled. "Testing me?" He grabbed her arm and pulled her back into her room, shutting the door behind them. "You could have been caught. Do you have any idea what they'd do if they saw you wandering free?" "I had to try," she snapped. "I can't just sit here waiting to die." His anger faltered. For a moment, he only looked at her, eyes storm grey, face pale. Then, quietly, he said, "You won't die here. Not if I can stop it." The words hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to doubt him, to remind herself that he was the enemy, but the conviction in his voice was real. He turned away quickly, as though ashamed. "You'll stay here until I say otherwise. No more risks." "You can't keep me prisoner forever," she said. He hesitated at the door. "I'm not trying to keep you prisoner," he said softly. "I'm trying to keep you alive." That night, Hermione dreamed of the forbidden forest, the way moonlight filtered through the trees, the scent of pine and damp earth. But when she woke, it wasn't the forest she smelled. It was smoke. A low rumble shook the manor. Shouts echoed through the halls. Hermione jumped to her feet, heart racing. The door burst open. Draco stumbled inside, his face pale. "They've come," he said hoarsely. "Snatchers. They brought prisoners, 2 of them, a redhead and a dark-haired boy." Her world stopped. "Harry! Ron!" Draco looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know yet. Stay here." But Hermione was already moving. She darted past him, ignoring his shout. Down the hall, down the stairs, toward the grand entrance where chaos reigned. Death Eaters filled the foyer, their wands raised, their laughter cruel. And there, through the crowd, she saw them. 2 figures dragged across the floor, bruised, beaten, but unmistakable. Harry Potter and Ron Weasley. Her breath caught. Her mind screamed to call out, but before she could, a hand closed over her mouth and pulled her back into the shadows. Draco's voice hissed in her ear. "Do you want to die?" She froze. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't fight him. He held her there, pressed against the cold wall until the chaos below faded into distant noise. When he finally let go, her voice shook. "You lied. You said they escaped." "I thought they had," he said quietly. "Or maybe I wanted to believe it." Hermione turned away, biting back tears. "What will they do to them?" He hesitated, his voice low. "What they do to everyone, unless we stop it." Her head whipped around. We. Draco met her gaze. His expression had changed, no longer the cool, detached mask she'd grown used to. There was resolve there now. Fear, too, but a fear that served something greater. "If you trust me," he said softly, "I can save them." Hermione stared at him, the sound of shouts and footsteps echoing from below. For the first time since her capture, she saw the faint outline of hope, and the strange, terrifying truth that her fate and her friends might depend entirely on Draco Malfoy. And when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. The manor trembled with noise and fury. From the depths of the marble halls came shouts, curses, the crash of spells. Hermione's heart thudded painfully in her chest as she crouched beside Draco, hidden in the shadow of an arched doorway. The faint light from the chandeliers flickered against the walls, revealing flashes of masks, cloaks, and wands drawn. "They've brought them to the drawing room," Draco whispered. His face was pale, his eyes dark with dread. "Harry and Ron." Hermione's voice was barely a breath. He nodded once. "And someone else. They're trying to confirm who they've caught." She gripped his arm. "We have to do something." Draco shook his head sharply. "No, you don't understand what you're asking." But she did. Every word, every sound from below tore at her. She remembered the last time she'd seen them. Harry shouting for her to run, Ron's hand slipping from hers. The guilt had haunted her for days. She couldn't bear to lose them now, not when they were so close. Draco turned toward her, his jaw tight. "If you're seen, they'll kill you. And me. My father is already suspicious. Bellatrix will torture them." Hermione cut in fiercely. "She'll do it for fun, Draco. You know she will." His face hardened, but he didn't deny it. The noise from the drawing room grew louder. Hermione heard Bellatrix's cackling voice, the unmistakable ring of terror beneath it. She took a step forward, but Draco caught her wrist. "Wait. Let me go." "Not yet." His grip tightened. "You can't rush in. You'll ruin everything." "Everything?" she hissed. "What are you talking about?" Draco's eyes flicked toward the corridor. "I have a plan. A small one. A dangerous one. But it might give you and them a chance." She stared at him, caught between fury and hope. "Then tell me." He hesitated only a moment. "There's a passage beneath the manor. It leads to the old gardens. The wards there are weaker. My mother made sure of it. If I can distract Bellatrix long enough, you can get to it. But you'll need a wand." Hermione glanced toward his. "Then give me yours." A faint smile ghosted across his lips. "You don't trust me enough for that." She frowned. "You're right. I don't. But I'm running out of choices." For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Draco took a breath, removed his wand, and pressed it into her hand. "Don't make me regret this." The air seemed to still between them. Hermione nodded once. "I won't." Draco glanced down the hall. "When I leave, count to 10. Then follow the left corridor until you reach the spiral stairs. Don't stop for anything." Before she could speak, he stepped into the light. Hermione's breath caught. He walked straight toward the drawing room, his stride steady, his expression unreadable. She waited. 1 heartbeat. 2, 3. The sound of Bellatrix's voice rose, shrill and angry. "You took your time, Draco. Perhaps you'd like to tell me who our visitors are." Hermione crept forward. The door to the drawing room was slightly ajar. Through the narrow gap, she saw them. Harry, Ron, and a third figure she recognized instantly. Luna Lovegood, pale but calm, her eyes serene even in fear. Bellatrix prowled before them like a wolf, her wand flickering with red light. Lucius Malfoy stood nearby, tense and uncertain. Hermione's stomach twisted as Bellatrix seized Harry by the hair. "Let's see what the boy hero looks like up close, shall we?" Then, in that terrible silence, Draco spoke. "Aunt Bellatrix," he said evenly, "the Dark Lord wanted any prisoners delivered directly to him. You're risking his anger." Bellatrix turned, her eyes glittering. "Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you, dear nephew? You think I don't see what game you play?" Draco didn't flinch. "I play no game, but if you damage them before he sees them..." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "He'll thank me for softening them up." Hermione's pulse hammered in her ears. She had to move now. She slipped away from the door, heart racing, and hurried down the corridor. The manor seemed to stretch endlessly. Every step echoed louder than it should. She reached the spiral staircase, clutching Draco's wand tight. Somewhere behind her, she heard another scream, Harry's this time, and her breath caught, but she kept running. The stairs twisted downward into darkness. Cobwebs brushed her face. The air grew colder. At the bottom was a narrow corridor of stone, lined with old torches that hadn't burned in years. Hermione whispered, "Lumos." The wand's tip flared softly, and shadows leapt along the walls. The passage curved ahead, but before she could take 3 steps, a voice whispered from the darkness, "Going somewhere, my dear." Hermione froze. Bellatrix Lestrange stepped from the shadows, wand raised, her eyes gleaming with madness. Hermione's mind went blank. She raised Draco's wand, but Bellatrix only laughed. "Oh, clever little mudblood, stealing a Malfoy's toy. Tell me, did you think you could run from me?" Her laughter echoed off the stone. Hermione's hand shook, but she forced herself to stand tall. "You'll have to kill me first." Bellatrix's smile widened. "Gladly." A jet of red light streaked toward her. Hermione dove aside. The spell struck the wall, showering sparks. She scrambled to her feet and fired back, shouting, "Stupefy!" Bellatrix deflected it effortlessly. "You'll have to do better." Another curse. Hermione ducked, her shoulder slamming into the wall. Pain flared, but adrenaline drove her on. She flung another spell, Expelliarmus, and for a moment, Bellatrix's wand wavered. "Impressive," the woman hissed, "but you'll never win with someone else's wand." Before Hermione could answer, a second voice cut through the chaos. "Leave her!" Draco stood at the mouth of the corridor, his wand drawn, his expression fierce. Bellatrix whirled on him. "You!" she shrieked. "You dare interfere again?" "Get away from her, Aunt," he said coldly. For a heartbeat, Bellatrix only stared. Then she threw back her head and laughed. "You're even more foolish than I thought. Do you really think you can stand against me?" "Try me," Draco said. Hermione's heart stuttered. The air around them crackled with tension. Bellatrix's eyes flashed. Very well. Her wand came up, gleaming with green light. Draco shouted a shield charm, and the curses collided mid-air with a blast that sent dust raining from the ceiling. Hermione staggered back, blinded by light and smoke. When it cleared, Bellatrix was gone. The corridor was silent again, save for the ragged sound of Draco's breathing. He swayed, his face pale, a cut along his cheek. Hermione caught him before he fell. "You're hurt." He gave a shaky laugh. "Better me than you." "Why did you—" "Because," he said quietly, I'm tired of watching her destroy everything." They stood there, breathless, surrounded by the echo of fading magic. Above them, the manor groaned, the war still raging in its walls. Hermione looked up toward the dark passage that led to freedom. "We can still save them," she whispered. Draco's eyes met hers. "Then let's try." And together they turned toward the light, the first faint glimmer of dawn seeping through the cracks of the old stone. The dawn that crept across the Wiltshire hills found Malfoy Manor scarred and shrouded in smoke. The air inside still crackled with the residue of magic, spells clashing and fading like ghosts of the night before. Somewhere deep within its cold heart, Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy moved swiftly through corridors once filled with laughter, now hollow and haunted. They had escaped the lower passage after Bellatrix's retreat, though the victory felt fragile, a single candle in a storm. Hermione could still feel the sting of the duel in her hands. Every step echoed with urgency. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "To the drawing room," Draco replied. His tone was clipped, but beneath it was a tremor of dread. "That's where your friends were taken. If Bellatrix is still there, we'll need to move fast." He kept his wand ready, glancing down each hallway before they advanced. Portraits turned their painted heads to watch them, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and alarm. The manor itself seemed to hold its breath. When they reached the marble staircase, Hermione caught sight of a faint line of blood trailing down the steps. She didn't need to ask whose it was. "Draco," she said softly, "what if we're too late?" He hesitated. For once, he didn't have a retort. "Then we'll still try," he said simply. They descended in silence. The grand foyer was dim, its chandeliers flickering with weak, dying light. The front doors stood sealed by dark enchantments. A shimmer of crimson magic wove across the handles like living fire. Hermione felt its pulse in the air. Voldemort's wards. No one could enter or leave without his will. The drawing room doors stood ajar. Through them came muffled voices, Bellatrix's wild laughter, Lucius's sharp whispers, and another voice, high and thin, commanding. Hermione's blood froze. Voldemort was there. Draco stopped abruptly, his face draining of color. "No," he breathed. "He wasn't supposed to return yet." Hermione's hand flew to her mouth. The very air seemed to thicken. Fear pressed down like a physical weight, chilling her bones. "We can't go in there," Draco whispered. "If he sees you, he'll kill me," Hermione finished quietly. He nodded, his jaw tight. "And me too, for helping you." They stood at the threshold, the faint flicker of torchlight painting their faces in golden shadow. Hermione's thoughts raced. She couldn't just abandon Harry and Ron, but to face Voldemort unarmed, even with Draco's wand. It would be suicide. Then, a voice echoed from within, unmistakable in its icy precision. "Bring them forward." Hermione's heart stopped. A shuffle of movement followed, then Harry's voice, weak, defiant. "You'll never win." Voldemort's laugh was soft, terrible. "Such faith, even in chains. Perhaps we should test it." Hermione clutched Draco's sleeve. "We can't stay here," he murmured. "There's a way through the servants' corridor. It leads to the gardens. If we circle around, we might reach the holding cells." "But they're in there," she whispered fiercely. He turned on her, his face pale with desperation. "And if you rush in now, you'll all die. You don't understand what he is, Granger." Hermione's breath came fast, shallow. Her every instinct screamed to act, to fight, to do something. But Draco's eyes, wide and fearful, kept her still. "Trust me," he said, and for the first time, she did. They slipped away as Voldemort's voice rose again behind them. The corridor that led toward the servants' quarters was narrow and dim, lined with cold stone. The scent of ash lingered in the air. Hermione could hear her heartbeat in her ears. She glanced sideways at Draco. He was moving quickly now, his jaw set, his wand raised. "What will you do?" she asked quietly, "when he finds out what you've done?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "He already suspects. The mark burns stronger every day." He pushed up his sleeve, and Hermione saw it. The dark mark, black and vivid against his pale skin, pulsing faintly like a wound. Her stomach turned. "It feels him," Draco said softly. "When he's near, it burns like fire. When he's angry, it feels as though he's inside my mind. Sometimes I think he is." Hermione reached out before she could stop herself, laying her hand lightly on his arm. "You're not him," she said. "No matter what you've done, you can still choose." He looked at her, something unspoken in his gaze. Then he turned away. "Let's hope I still can." They moved quickly after that. The corridor opened into a smaller hallway lined with iron doors, cells by the look of them. Draco flicked his wand, muttering under his breath, and one by one the locks clicked open. Inside, the air was damp and cold. A faint light flickered from a torch on the wall, illuminating two figures huddled in the corner. "Harry!" Hermione whispered, rushing forward. He turned, his glasses cracked, his face bruised but unmistakable. "Hermione? How?" "Later," she said quickly. "We need to go." Ron struggled to his feet beside him, his eyes narrowing as he saw Draco. "What's he doing here?" "He's helping us," Hermione said. Ron's jaw dropped. "Helping us? You've lost your mind." "Not now," she snapped. Draco ignored the exchange, glancing back toward the hall. "We don't have long. The wards are shifting. He'll know you're missing any moment." Harry pushed past the pane, standing tall. "Then lead the way." They followed Draco through the maze of corridors, each turn feeling heavier, the shadows deeper. Every sound made Hermione's nerves sing with dread. Finally, they reached the rear gardens. The air was damp and cold. Mist curled above the ground. The iron gate stood ahead, faintly glowing with enchantments. Draco approached it, muttering spells under his breath. His hands shook. These wards, Mother must have changed them. "Can you break them?" Hermione asked. "I can try." But before he could finish the spell, the ground beneath them trembled. A voice rang out across the courtyard, high and cold. "Leaving so soon, Draco?" They turned. Bellatrix stood in the archway, her wand raised, her smile mad and gleaming. "The Dark Lord is very displeased." "Run," Draco whispered. But Hermione didn't move. Neither did Harry or Ron. Bellatrix advanced slowly, her eyes fixed on Hermione. "Ah, our clever little mudblood. You never do learn your place." Hermione lifted her wand. "Maybe you'll finally learn yours." Spells erupted into the night. Red, blue, gold. Sparks flew, lighting the mist like fire. Hermione dodged a curse, flung another back, felt the air explode beside her. Bellatrix shrieked with laughter. Then, suddenly, the gate shuddered. Draco shouted a final word in Latin, and the wards broke apart like glass. "Go!" he yelled. Harry grabbed Hermione's arm, dragging her through the opening. Ron followed, turning only once to look back. Draco stood in the archway, wand raised, holding Bellatrix at bay. "Come with us!" Hermione shouted. He shook his head. "I'll buy you time." "Draco, go!" There was no choice. The night swallowed them, mist curling around their feet as they ran into the dark woods beyond. Behind them, the manor erupted with light and sound, screams, curses, the crash of walls breaking. When they finally stopped, breathless beneath the trees, Hermione turned back toward the faint glow in the distance. The manor still burned against the horizon, a smouldering silhouette of cruelty and defiance. "He saved us," she whispered. Harry placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll save him." But deep down, Hermione knew the path back would not be so simple. For in saving them, Draco Malfoy had bound himself to a fate darker than any curse. And somewhere in the smoke, behind the shattered walls of his family home, his story was far from over. The forest that spread beyond the Malfoy grounds was ancient, dark, and endless. Branches knotted together high above, hiding the sky from view. Mist clung to the undergrowth like a second skin, curling around every tree trunk. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the muffled thud of hurried footsteps. Hermione ran until her lungs burned. Behind her, she could hear Harry and Ron struggling to keep up, the damp air heavy with exhaustion and disbelief. Only when they reached a small clearing did she stop. She turned back, breathless, scanning the shadows behind them. The manor's glow was still visible through the trees, a pale smear of golden smoke on the horizon. "Is he following us?" Harry asked, his wand raised. Hermione shook her head. "No, he stayed behind." Ron spat on the ground. "Good. Let him. I can't believe you trusted him in the first place, Hermione. Malfoy, of all people." "He saved our lives," she snapped, sharper than she intended. Ron glared at her, his chest heaving. "He nearly got us killed. Don't tell me you've forgotten who his family is. You saw what that place was, what they've done." Hermione opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. The words tangled on her tongue. She could still see Draco's face in the glow of the breaking wards, torn between fear and resolve, his pale hair shining like a ghost in the firelight. "He didn't have to help us," she said quietly. Harry's gaze softened. "Maybe not, but he did." They stood in silence, the forest alive with the sigh of the wind through branches. For a brief moment, the war felt distant, a nightmare fading with dawn. But Hermione knew better. The reprieve would not last. "We need to move," Harry said finally. "The Snatchers will be searching soon, and if Voldemort knows we escaped, he'll send every Death Eater in England after us," Ron finished grimly. Hermione nodded. She glanced at the faint light creeping through the trees, the first edge of sunrise. It painted the mist in pale gold, making the forest look almost beautiful, almost peaceful. They walked for hours, following a narrow stream that cut through the woods. Hermione tried to focus on their path, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Draco. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing in that archway, his wand raised, his voice breaking through the chaos. "Go!" He had made his choice, but what would it cost him? By midday, the forest began to thin. They found an old stone cottage half buried in ivy, its roof sagging but intact. It was far enough from the manor that they dared stop. Hermione waved her wand, muttering protective charms, while Harry and Ron searched for food. Inside, the cottage smelled of damp wood and dust. A single fireplace sat in the corner, filled with ashes that looked decades old. Hermione knelt to rekindle it, her wand steady, but her hands trembling. The flames flared to life with a soft crackle, casting warmth into the room. Harry sat across from her, his green eyes thoughtful. "You're thinking about him," he said quietly. Hermione looked up, startled. "What?" "Malfoy," Harry said. "You've been quiet since we left. I know that look. You're wondering what happened to him." She hesitated. "He's still there, with them. Voldemort won't forgive betrayal." Ron snorted. "Good. Serves him right." "Ron!" Hermione's voice rose. He threw up his hands. "What? He's a Death Eater. Don't tell me you've gone soft on him, Hermione." Harry shot Ron a warning glance, but Hermione was already standing. "He made a choice, Ron. The same kind of choice we make every day, to fight or to look away. You think that was easy for him, to defy his family, his own blood?" Ron's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Harry broke the silence. "Hermione's right. Whatever Malfoy was, he's not the same boy we knew at Hogwarts." Hermione sank back down, staring into the fire. The flames danced in her eyes, bright and restless. "If he's still alive," she whispered, "he'll be punished. Voldemort doesn't just kill traitors, he destroys them." Harry reached into his cloak and drew out a crumpled piece of parchment, the Marauder's map. He tapped it with his wand. Mischief managed. The surface rippled and lines began to form. Corridors, names, rooms. But Malfoy Manor was blank. "No one's there," he said. "Either it's warded, or they've all gone." Hermione's stomach turned. "Gone where?" No one answered. As night fell, they took turns keeping watch. The forest outside had gone still, too still. Hermione sat near the window, her wand resting on her knee. The moonlight fell across her face, soft and pale. She didn't notice when Harry came to sit beside her. "You can't save everyone," he said quietly. "I know. But you'll try anyway." Hermione smiled faintly. "Always." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind. Then, from somewhere far away, came the faintest sound, a low, distant rumble. Hermione froze. What was that? Harry stood, alert. "Apparition! Several of them!" Ron scrambled to his feet. "Death Eaters?" "Maybe." Hermione's pulse quickened. "We have to leave." But before they could reach the door, a knock echoed through the cottage. Once, twice, 3 times. Slow, deliberate. Harry raised his wand. "Stay back." The door creaked open on its own. A gust of cold air swept inside, scattering ash from the hearth. For a moment, no one moved. Then a figure stepped across the threshold, hooded, staggering slightly. Hermione's heart stopped. The stranger lowered his hood. Pale hair, grey eyes, and a face marked by exhaustion and soot. "Draco," she breathed. He looked like a ghost, his robes torn, his hands trembling, a thin line of blood running down his temple. "They're gone," he said hoarsely. "The Dark Lord left the manor. He's hunting you himself." Harry's wand stayed raised. "And you expect us to believe you?" Draco met his gaze steadily. "Believe what you like, but if you want to live, you'll listen." Hermione stepped forward, ignoring Harry's warning. "How did you find us?" "I followed the wards," Draco said. "The manor's defenses. My mother left a trace. She wanted you to escape." "Narcissa," Hermione whispered. He nodded. "She told me to find you before he did. She knew. He'd come for you first." Harry's eyes narrowed. "Why help us now?" Draco's voice broke. "Because you were right, about choices." Hermione felt the world tilt slightly as if the air itself held its breath. Behind Draco, the forest shifted. A wind rose, carrying whispers through the trees. The dark mark glowed faintly on his arm, burning through the torn fabric of his sleeve. He winced. "He's close," Draco said. "We don't have much time." Harry exchanged a look with Hermione, half trust, half uncertainty. "Then we move. Now." Hermione reached out, steadying Draco by the arm. His skin was cold as marble. For a moment, their eyes met, hers full of fire, his shadowed with something she couldn't name. Outside, the first thunder rolled through the forest. Lightning flashed, illuminating the path ahead. Together, the four of them stepped into the storm, leaving the broken cottage behind. And somewhere far beyond the trees, in the ruins of Malfoy Manor, a serpent's hiss echoed into the night. The storm rose before dawn, tearing across the forest with a fury that felt almost sentient. Trees bowed beneath the wind, their branches clawing at the air. Rain lashed through the canopy, striking the ground in silver sheets. Within that storm, 4 figures moved swiftly beneath the trees, their cloaks plastered to their backs, wands drawn and eyes sharp. Hermione could barely see through the downpour. The storm drowned out every other sound, the pounding of her heart, the ragged rhythm of her breath, even the low curses Harry muttered as he stumbled through the mud ahead. Behind her, Draco struggled to keep up, limping slightly, his face pale and set. When they finally reached a clearing, Hermione raised her wand and whispered a charm. A shimmering dome of dry air spread above them, offering brief shelter from the rain. The others gathered close, dripping and breathless. Ron dropped onto a fallen log, shaking his hair like a dog. "Brilliant," he muttered. "Escaped from one death trap straight into another. Do we even know where we're going?" "North," Harry replied, scanning the trees. "We need distance before Voldemort finds our trail again." "North to what?" Ron asked bitterly. "There's nowhere safe left, Harry. Nowhere." Hermione knelt beside Draco. His hands were trembling and his breathing came shallow. "You're hurt," she said softly. He shook his head. "It's nothing. It's not nothing." She touched his sleeve, gently pulling it back. The skin beneath was scorched around the dark mark, the edges raw and angry. Draco flinched. "He knows," he said quietly. "Every time I use magic, he feels it. He'll know where I am soon." Hermione met his gaze. "Then we keep moving. Together." Ron's eyes widened. "Together? Have you lost it, Hermione? We can't drag him along. He's a walking target." Harry didn't answer immediately. His expression was unreadable, but there was a glint of something like pity in his eyes. "He's right about one thing. Voldemort's link to him is dangerous. But he helped us once, and that has to count for something." Draco gave a short, bitter laugh. "You really are the saint they say you are, Potter." Harry's tone sharpened. "Don't mistake mercy for trust." Hermione stood, brushing the rain from her hair. "Enough. We'll decide where to go once we've rested." She turned toward the edge of the clearing, staring into the endless darkness beyond the trees. The forest stretched on and on, a labyrinth of shadows. She could almost feel the magic in the air, old and wild, humming beneath the earth like a pulse. When she returned to the fire, Draco was watching her. "You shouldn't stay near me," he said quietly. "Why not?" "Because if he comes through me, if he sees what I see, you'll all die." Hermione studied him for a long moment. "You underestimate how stubborn I can be." A faint smile touched his lips, the first she'd seen in days. I think I learned that years ago. The rain eased as the night waned, though thunder still rolled far away. By the time the first light of morning filtered through the clouds, Hermione had managed to find a small cave at the edge of a ravine. They took shelter inside, the damp air heavy with smoke and exhaustion. Harry sat at the entrance, keeping watch. Ron busied himself with drying their soaked cloaks. Hermione tended Draco's burns in silence, her wand glowing softly as she murmured healing charms. "You're wasting magic," he said. "You're wasting breath arguing," she replied without looking up. He gave a quiet huff of laughter, though it ended in a wince. "You haven't changed." Hermione finally met his eyes. "Neither have you. Don't be so sure." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm's echo faded beyond the trees, leaving only the steady crackle of their small fire. Hermione could see the fatigue in his face, the hollows beneath his eyes, the tightness around his mouth. He looked older than his years, every ounce of arrogance stripped away. When she finished, she handed him a strip of bread from her bag. "Eat." He hesitated, then took it. "Thank you," he said softly. Harry turned from the cave mouth. "We need to move again soon, once daylight's stronger." Ron groaned. "We've barely closed our eyes." "Voldemort won't rest," Harry said simply. Draco looked up at him, his expression serious. "You don't understand how far he'll go. He's not just hunting you anymore. He's furious. You escaped his hold at the manor, humiliated him in front of the others. He'll burn the world if he has to." Harry's jaw tightened. "Then let him try." Hermione sighed. "Bravery isn't the same as recklessness." Draco gave her a tired look. "You'd think you were married to him, the way you lecture." Hermione rolled her eyes. "If you can joke, you're healing." The smallest spark of humor flickered between them, quickly gone. But Harry noticed the look they exchanged, brief and wordless, and something in his expression softened. When they finally stepped out into the morning light, the world looked washed clean. Mist rose from the forest floor. Sunlight spilled in fragile gold through the trees. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind was uneasy. They followed a narrow deer trail that wound along the ravine, moving cautiously. The ground was slick, and the air smelled of moss and rain. Hermione walked beside Draco, half ready to steady him if he faltered. "Do you think she's alive?" Hermione asked after a while. "Your mother." He didn't look at her. "She was when I left. She told me to run, said she'd hold them off as long as she could." "I'm sorry," she whispered. He glanced at her then, his eyes unreadable. "You're the first person who's ever said that and meant it." Before Hermione could answer, Harry halted abruptly, raising his wand. "Someone's here." They froze. The forest had gone utterly still. A heartbeat later, a voice drifted through the trees, soft, lilting, unmistakably familiar. "Harry Potter," it said. "You've wandered far from safety." A tall figure stepped into view, cloaked in black. The hood fell back, revealing a pale face and dark, piercing eyes. "Snape," Harry breathed. The professor regarded them coolly, his expression unreadable. "You're difficult to track, Potter, but the Dark Lord's fury leaves a wide trail." His gaze shifted to Draco, then to Hermione. "And it seems you found unusual company." Draco straightened, his face pale but defiant. "If you've come to drag me back, you'll have to kill me first." Snape's lips twitched, not quite a smile. I rather expected as much. Hermione's wand shook slightly in her hand. Whose side are you on? Snape's dark eyes met hers, the only side that still has a chance to win. For a long, breathless moment, no one spoke. Then he turned sharply. Follow me. The forest isn't safe anymore. Harry hesitated. Why should we trust you? Snape's voice was cold as steel. Because if you don't, you'll be dead before nightfall. He turned away, striding into the shadows. For a heartbeat, the others stood frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. Then Hermione took a step forward. Come on, she said. Harry followed, then Ron. Draco lingered last, casting one final glance at the pale morning sky before stepping into the darkness after them. And as the forest swallowed them whole, the air seemed to hum with unseen power, as though the world itself held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The path Snape led them down twisted like a serpent through the forest, hidden beneath tangles of roots and bracken. Mist hung low over the ground, coiling around their boots as they followed him in tense silence. The sun had risen fully now, though its light barely pierced the canopy. Every step they took seemed to echo through the still air. Hermione kept her wand close, her eyes fixed on the tall black figure ahead. Snape moved with purpose, his cloak whispering over the wet leaves. He never looked back, yet somehow he knew when they lagged behind, pausing only long enough for them to catch up before continuing deeper into the woods. Ron leaned toward Harry, muttering, I still don't like this. Following Snape? Have we gone mad? Harry's voice was low but steady. We don't have a choice. He's right. The forest isn't safe anymore. Was it ever? Ron shot back, but he said no more. They walked for nearly an hour before the trees began to thin. The ground sloped downward, and a faint glimmer appeared through the mist. A small lake, its surface smooth as glass. Snape stopped at the water's edge and turned to face them. This place is hidden by old magic, he said. Wards set long before the Dark Lord's rise. You may rest here for a time. Harry narrowed his eyes. You brought us here out of kindness, then? Snape's expression didn't change. Out of necessity. The Dark Lord's forces are combing the countryside. You've left a trail even a child could follow. Consider this a temporary reprieve. Ron snorted. That's one way of saying we owe you. Snape ignored him. His gaze shifted to Draco, who stood apart from the others, silent and pale. You've caused quite a stir, he said. Your mother's actions have not gone unnoticed. The Dark Lord's patience with your family grows thin. Draco lifted his chin, though his voice trembled slightly when he spoke. Then he'll have to kill us all. I'm done serving him. Snape's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. Bravery, he murmured, is often indistinguishable from desperation. Hermione stepped forward. Professor, why are you helping us? Snape's dark gaze flicked to her, unreadable. Because the tide of war is turning, and because I made promises that must be kept. Harry's jaw tightened. Promises to who? To the dead, Snape said quietly. And perhaps, in the end, to the living as well. No one spoke after that. The lake rippled faintly under the weight of their silence. They made camp along the shore, sheltered beneath the twisted roots of an ancient tree. Snape disappeared for a time, moving through the forest like a shadow. When he returned, he carried a small pouch filled with herbs and a flask of water. Without a word, he handed them to Hermione. For your burns, he said to Draco, who had retreated to a patch of moss near the tree. Draco took the pouch without meeting his eyes. You're awfully generous, considering. Snape's reply was curt. I am not generous. I am efficient. Hermione knelt beside Draco, helping him apply the salve. The scent of it filled the air, cool, sharp, like mint and pine. He hissed as it touched his skin. You should have let me handle Bellatrix, he muttered under his breath. She looked up, frowning. You'd be dead if I had. Draco met her gaze, something unreadable flickering in his expression. Maybe that would have been simpler. Don't say that, she whispered. Their eyes held for a moment longer before he turned away, jaw tight. The wind off the lake stirred the hair at his temple, catching in the faint morning light. When Hermione rose, Snape was watching her. You've taken a great risk for him, he said quietly. She met his eyes. He risked his life for mine. Snape inclined his head slightly, as though acknowledging a truth he didn't care to speak aloud. Loyalty can be a dangerous gift, Miss Granger. It binds us as surely as any curse. I don't regret it. A faint smile ghosted across his lips. No, you wouldn't. That night, the storm returned. Rain lashed the trees and lightning flickered across the lake like veins of silver. They huddled close beneath the roots, the small fire flickering between them. Harry kept watch, his wand glowing faintly blue in the darkness. Hermione sat beside Draco, listening to the thunder roll across the sky. He was quieter now, exhaustion etched into his features. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible above the storm. Do you think your mother made it out? Draco's eyes opened, grey and distant. If anyone could survive him, it's her. She's stronger than people think. Hermione nodded. You are too. He gave a small, bitter laugh. You don't know me. I know enough. Something in her tone made him look at her. Really look. You're impossible. You know that? He said softly. Hermione smiled faintly. I've been told. For a moment, the war outside seemed to fade. The thunder, the fear, the endless running. There was only the soft crackle of firelight and the warmth of their shoulders brushing as they sat side by side. When dawn came again, Snape roused them early. His face was grim. The wards have weakened. They'll find this place soon. We moved north toward the hills. Harry stood, stretching stiffly. What's there? Ruins, Snape replied. Older than Hogwarts. Few dare to enter them. That is where you'll be safest, for a while. Hermione glanced back at the lake as they left, watching the mist curl across its still surface. It felt like leaving behind a secret they could never return to. They walked until the forest gave way to open moorland. The hills rose before them, rolling and vast, covered in heather and stone. The wind there smelled of rain and freedom, yet Hermione couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking towards something inevitable. As they climbed, Draco fell into step beside her. When this is over, he said quietly, what will you do? She hesitated. I don't know. Help rebuild, maybe. Try to make the world better than the one we inherited. He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. You always did think you could fix everything. Someone has to try. He didn't answer, but when the wind swept between them, she felt the faintest brush of his hand against hers, a fleeting, uncertain touch, gone almost before it began. By evening, they reached the crest of the hill. Below them, nestled in the valley, stood the ruins Snape had spoken of. Stone arches half swallowed by ivy, a single spire reaching toward the sky. It looked abandoned. forgotten. Snape's cloak billowed in the wind as he looked down at it. "Welcome," he said quietly, "to the sanctuary of Aveline. What remains of it, at least?" Hermione stared. The place felt alive with old magic, humming faintly in the air. "What is this place?" Snape's eyes gleamed in the fading light. "A refuge for those who defied darker masters once before. Perhaps it will serve again." As they descended toward the ruins, the first stars began to pierce the twilight. The wall for a moment seemed far away. But Hermione knew better than to believe in peace so easily. For in the distance, beyond the moors, the faint shape of smoke curled once more into the sky, dark and rising. Voldemort was hunting again. The sanctuary of Aveline loomed like a memory carved from stone and silence. Its archways, fractured but proud, still bore the faint traces of runes, too ancient for Hermione to decipher. Wild ivy clung to its walls, weaving green veins through the pale marble. The air hummed with a strange living energy, the residue of enchantments laid down centuries before. They entered through what had once been a great gate, its doors long vanished. Beyond stretched a courtyard filled with moss and silver grass. The remnants of fountains gleamed faintly in the moonlight, water still trickling from unseen springs. Hermione felt magic everywhere, old and patient. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Snape's voice was low, almost reverent. Aveline was a fortress of resistance during the first Wizarding Wars, long before Grindelwald, long before your time, Potter. It was built to shelter those hunted for their beliefs. Draco stepped past him, his hand brushing a carved pillar. "And you think it'll shelter us now?" "I think," Snape replied, "that it will hold long enough for us to decide what comes next." Harry frowned. "You sound like you already know what that is." Snape's dark gaze flicked to him. "Knowledge and control are rarely the same thing." They set up camp in what had once been the main hall. Its roof half collapsed, its vast windows open to the stars. Hermione worked silently, spreading blankets and summoning a gentle warmth with her wand. The others gathered what supplies they had left. For the first time in days, they were safe enough to breathe. When the fire was lit, its glow flickered against the worn stone, throwing shadows that danced like ghosts along the walls. Draco sat apart, staring into the flames. His expression was unreadable, though the lines of exhaustion etched across his face seemed deeper than ever. Hermione found herself watching him, her thoughts tangled and uncertain. She told herself it was concern, that she owed him gratitude, nothing more. But something else stirred beneath that logic, something fragile and unnamed. "Stop staring, Granger," he said without looking up. Her cheeks flushed. "I wasn't." "You were," he said softly. "You always do when you're thinking too much." Hermione's mouth twitched despite herself. "Then it must be exhausting for you." He almost smiled, then turned away. "You've no idea." Across the hall, Ron muttered something about trusting Slytherins, and Harry shushed him. Snape, meanwhile, had begun tracing runes along the walls with the tip of his wand, whispering incantations too old to recognize. The air shimmered faintly as barriers wove themselves into place, layers of protective spells settling over the ruins like mist. When he finished, he looked pale, almost spent. Hermione rose instinctively. "You're weakening the wards yourself, aren't you? Drawing on your own magic to bind them." Snape inclined his head slightly. "They must be personal to be effective." Magic of this kind responds to intent and sacrifice. That's dangerous, she said. So is everything worth doing. He turned away before she could respond, his robes sweeping through the dust. That night, the ruins slept beneath a mantle of wind and starlight. The fire burned low, and one by one the others drifted into uneasy dreams. Hermione sat awake, her back against the cool stone, her wand resting in her lap. Across the fire, Draco lay awake too, eyes reflecting the dim embers. "Why are you still up?" she whispered. He gave a faint shrug. "Can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see that house. The walls, the screams." Hermione's chest tightened. "You did what you could. You saved us." "Did I?" His voice was quiet, brittle. "Because it doesn't feel that way. It feels like I lost everything. You didn't." He laughed, hollow and tired. "You're wrong. I lost my home, my family, the only life I've ever known. And for what? For people who will never trust me." Hermione hesitated, then said, "I trust you." He looked at her sharply, searching her face for the lie. When he found none, his voice softened. "You shouldn't." "Maybe not," she said, "but I do." Silence settled between them, thick as fog. The firelight painted their faces in golden shadow, their eyes catching the same glint of flame. At last, Draco spoke again, so quietly she almost didn't hear. "If we live through this, do you think people like me get forgiven?" Hermione's answer came after a long pause. "I think people earn forgiveness, not by asking for it, by proving they deserve it." He nodded slowly, gaze dropping to the embers. "Then I've got a long way to go." She smiled faintly. "So do we all." When dawn came, Snape was gone. Harry found the mark of his departure, a faint shimmer in the air where one of the wards had been disturbed, and a single line of writing carved into the stone above the door. "The path divides, but purpose remains." No one spoke for a long time. Harry's jaw was set, his eyes distant. "He's going back," he said at last, "to Voldemort." Hermione frowned. "Why would he do that? He'll be killed." "Maybe that's the point," Harry said quietly. The day stretched long and tense. They searched the ruins for anything useful, food, relics, spells, but found little more than dust and memory. The ruins had once been a sanctuary. Now they were a graveyard of lost hope. As the sun set, Hermione wandered to the edge of the cliff beyond the hall. From there, she could see the valley below, golden with fading light. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of heather and smoke. Draco joined her, his cloak wrapped tight against the chill. "He's not coming back, is he?" She shook her head. "No, I don't think he ever meant to." They stood together in silence, the sky burning with the last light of day. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, not from storm clouds this time, but from faraway spells echoing across the countryside. The war was creeping closer. Hermione turned to him, her voice steady. "When it comes, you'll have to choose again." Draco's gaze lingered on the horizon. "I already have." She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't need to. That night, when the fire burned low and sleep claimed them one by one, Hermione dreamed of two wands crossing in a burst of light, one dark, one bright, and of a voice whispering through the wind, "All debts must be paid." She woke with her heart pounding, the dream fading like smoke. But outside, beneath the whisper of the ruins, she could swear she heard footsteps in the distance, soft, deliberate, drawing closer. And as she rose, wand in hand, she knew that the sanctuary of Aveline would not remain safe for long. The first light of dawn crept through the broken arches of Aveline, soft and uncertain. It painted the ruined stones in shades of gold and grey, but it brought no comfort. The air was too still, too sharp, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Hermione stood at the edge of the courtyard, her wand gripped tightly in her hand. The sound that had woken her, the faint rhythm of footsteps on gravel, had stopped. For a moment, she thought she might have imagined it. Yet something in the air had changed. The magic that had hummed quietly through the sanctuary now felt restless, uneasy. "Someone's here," she whispered. Harry appeared at her side, his hair tousled, eyes alert. Ron stumbled after him, rubbing sleep from his face, and Draco followed last, silent but watchful. The tension that gripped them all was almost physical. They spread out, moving slowly through the ruins. The morning mist clung to the ground, curling around their boots like smoke. Every crack in the stone, every shadow beneath an archway seemed suddenly alive. Then a voice drifted through the silence, familiar, cold, and terribly calm. "Did you think you could hide forever?" The air went still. Hermione felt her stomach twist. From the shadows beneath the outer gate, a figure emerged. He was tall, his robes dark and rippling in the wind, his face pale as death. Lucius Malfoy. Draco froze where he stood. The blood drained from his face. "Father." Lucius's eyes found him, glinting like steel. "You've disgraced our name, boy. Your mother is missing, your master betrayed, and your family ruined." Draco took a step back, his wand trembling slightly. "You don't understand." "I understand all too well," Lucius hissed. "You chose your side." Harry raised his wand. "If you've come to drag him back, you'll have to go through us." Lucius's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "How noble. Potter, the hero, still playing the savior, I see." Before Harry could answer, Lucius flicked his wand. The spell hit like thunder. A column of stone exploded beside them, sending shards flying through the air. Hermione threw up a shield, her magic flaring bright and gold. The impact rattled her bones. "Run!" she shouted. Draco didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at his father as if rooted to the ground. "He'll never stop," he said quietly. "Then fight him," Hermione said. Lucius's gaze flicked toward her. "Ah, the mudblood who's stolen my son's spine." Hermione's hand tightened around her wand. "Better that than serve a monster." Lucius's smile vanished. "You'll regret that, girl." He raised his wand again, but this time Draco was faster. A jet of blue light shot from his wand, striking Lucius square in the chest. The older man staggered back, eyes wide with shock. "Draco!" Hermione cried, but his face was set, pale and determined. Lucius recovered quickly, fury twisting his features. "You dare raise your wand against me?" "You made me," Draco said, voice shaking. "You taught me how." They clashed again, father and son, their spells colliding in bursts of light that lit the courtyard like lightning. The sound was deafening. Harry joined the fray, firing curses to drive Lucius back, while Ron hurled a charm that sent a column of debris crashing between them. Hermione stood beside Draco, shielding him when Lucius's hexes came too close. Each time she raised her wand, the force of the spells tore at the air around her. The ruins themselves seemed to tremble under the strain. At last, Lucius faltered. He stumbled against a broken pillar, his robe scorched, his face twisted with rage. His wand hand shook. "This isn't over," he hissed. "The Dark Lord knows where you are. He's coming for you. All of you." Then, before any of them could react, he turned on the spot and vanished. The echo of his departure hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, no one moved. Draco stood in silence, his wand still raised, his breathing ragged. Hermione stepped toward him, touching his arm lightly. "It's over." He shook his head. "No, it's never over with him." Harry looked toward the horizon. "He's right about one thing. Voldemort will come. If Lucius escaped, he'll tell him everything." Hermione turned to Snape's wards, still shimmering faintly against the morning light. "Will they hold?" Draco's eyes met hers. "Not for long." They spent the rest of the day preparing. The sanctuary that had felt so vast now seemed small, fragile. Harry and Ron fortified the entrance with new spells, layering them over the old runes. Hermione gathered supplies, her movements brisk but mechanical. Draco helped in silence, though his hands trembled whenever he cast a charm. By nightfall, a strange calm settled over the ruins. The wind had died, and the world outside the walls was eerily quiet. They ate in silence by the fire. No one spoke of Lucius. No one dared. When the others finally drifted to sleep, Hermione found Draco standing again by the edge of the cliff, staring into the darkness beyond the valley. The moonlight painted his face in silver. "He'll never forgive me," he said softly. Hermione stood beside him. "He doesn't have to. Forgiveness isn't his to give anymore." Draco turned to her then, eyes shadowed but clear. "You really believe we can win this?" "I have to," she said simply. He studied her face, as though searching for something he couldn't name. "You're not afraid." "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But fear isn't the same as surrender." Something broke in his expression, an exhaustion, a sorrow too deep to name. Before she could think, he reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. The touch was tentative, uncertain, but real. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" "For seeing me, even when I didn't deserve it." She didn't pull away. "You deserve a chance, Draco. That's all anyone can ask for." They stood like that for a long time, two figures framed against the endless dark. The wind rose again, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke. Hermione turned her face toward the valley. In the distance, she could see it. Tiny points of light flickering in the mist. Torches. "They're coming," she whispered. Draco's hand tightened around his wand. "Then this is where it begins." The first echoes of marching feet reached them as the horizon burned red with dawn. And within the ruins of Aveline, the last defenders of light prepared for war. The night that followed was long and heavy, the kind of silence that settles before a storm. The sanctuary of Aveline, once a refuge of ancient power, seemed to tremble with every whisper of wind. Moonlight slid through the broken arches, turning the stones to silver and the air to frost. The torches they'd seen in the distance had vanished into the dark, but everyone knew what that meant. The Death Eaters were gathering. Hermione sat by the fire, her wand resting across her knees, her eyes unfocused on the flames. Sleep was impossible. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Lucius Malfoy's face, cold, accusing, full of contempt, and beyond him, a darker shadow waiting, watching. Across the room, Harry was pacing. He had spread a map on the stone floor, marking it with bits of chalk. "They'll come from the north," he said, tracing a line with his wand. "There's a ridge that leads straight into the valley. We can set traps along the path." Ron frowned. "Traps? What kind of traps? We barely have enough magic to keep the wards standing." "I can handle the wards," Hermione said quietly. "If we strengthen the old runes Snape left, they'll hold long enough to slow them down." Draco, seated on a low stone near the wall, lifted his gaze from the floor. "They won't stop him," he said softly. "Not the Dark Lord. No barrier ever does." Harry's expression hardened. "Then we'll make him fight for every inch." A strange stillness followed. They all knew what was coming, yet none of them could voice the truth aloud. This was no simple skirmish. This would be the end of something, one way or another. When the plans were set, they went their separate ways to prepare. Hermione walked the perimeter of the sanctuary, her wand tracing lines of light along the crumbling stone. The runes flared, pulsing once before settling into a steady glow. As she worked, she could feel the hum of the magic beneath her feet, the old wards awakening, remembering. Draco followed her in silence, keeping a respectful distance. When she turned to find him watching her, his expression was unreadable. "You should rest," she said. "You look like you haven't slept in days." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "And you look like you've taken the weight of the world on your shoulders. Again." "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be." Hermione brushed a strand of hair from her face, ignoring the flutter in her chest. "The wards need symmetry. Help me with the southern arch." They worked together in the dim light, their spells weaving through the air in twin patterns of gold and blue. When the final rune settled, glowing faintly against the stone, Draco stepped back, his face illuminated by the soft light. "You're good at this," he said quietly. She looked at him. "You sound surprised." "I'm not. I just—" He hesitated. "When we were at Hogwarts, I never really saw you. Not properly. I thought you were just another Gryffindor who liked proving everyone wrong." Hermione's lips curved slightly. "And now?" "Now," he said, his voice low, "I see someone who never stopped fighting, even when everyone told her she couldn't win." The words lingered in the air, heavier than any spell. She wanted to look away, to break the moment, but she couldn't. There was something raw in his voice, an honesty that hadn't existed in the boy she once knew. "People change," she said softly. He gave a small, sad nod. "Some of us are just slower at it." Before she could reply, a sudden sound split the night, a distant crack like thunder. Hermione's wand was in her hand before she realized it. She turned toward the valley. The sky there was bleeding red, flashes of light rippling through the clouds. "They're here," Draco whispered. The alarm spread quickly. Harry was already at the gate shouting orders. "Wands up! Stay behind cover. Don't waste your spells unless you have to." Ron took his place at the eastern wall, muttering defensive charms under his breath. Hermione and Draco joined Harry at the front. The valley below was alight with movement, dark shapes emerging from the mist, their torches flaring like dying stars. And at the center of them, tall and unmistakable, was Voldemort. Hermione felt her blood run cold. Even from this distance, his presence was suffocating. The air seemed to warp around him, the grass withering where he walked. He raised his wand once, and the first curse struck the wards. The ground shuddered. The ancient runes flared bright, then dimmed. "Hold!" Harry shouted. "Don't break formation!" A volley of spells followed, red, green, and gold streaks cutting through the night. The wards held for a heartbeat, then another, until the force of the attack made them tremble like glass. Hermione raised her wand high, shouting the incantations Snape had left engraved into the walls. The runes blazed with new life, spreading across the stones in a wave of light. The barrier surged upward again, shimmering like water. Draco joined her, his voice steady. "Protego Maxima." Their magic collided, merging, strengthening. For a moment, the light held back the darkness, but Voldemort's laughter broke through the storm of spells, a thin, terrible sound that carried across the valley. "You cannot hide behind relics of the past," he hissed. "I will break them, and you with them." The next curse shattered the first layer of the wards. Stone cracked. Dust rained down from the arches. "Fall back!" Harry shouted. "To the hall!" They retreated, the air alive with the hiss of curses and the crash of splintering stone. The sanctuary, once calm and eternal, was now a battleground. Hermione stumbled over debris, her wand flashing as she deflected another hex. Sparks filled the air. When they reached the hall, Harry and Ron took positions at the door, firing spells to slow the advance. Draco stood beside Hermione, chest heaving, eyes burning with fierce determination. "This is madness," he said through gritted teeth. "We can't hold them off forever." Hermione turned to him, her face pale but resolute. "Then we don't try to. We stall them until we can find a way to end it." Her gaze flicked to Harry. He knew what she meant. He nodded once. Draco looked between them, realization dawning. "You're going after him, aren't you? Potter, he'll kill you." Harry's voice was steady. "Maybe, but he has to be stopped." Hermione reached for Draco's hand. "We'll need time. Can you give us that?" He hesitated, then squeezed her hand briefly. "Go. I'll hold the line." She wanted to say something. "Thank you. Be careful. Don't die." But the words caught in her throat. All she could do was look at him one last time before turning toward the shattered doorway. The night outside burned with magic. The war had come to Aveline. As Harry and Hermione ran into the storm of spells, Draco turned back toward the gate. The Death Eaters were closing in, their shouts echoing through the ruins. He raised his wand, pale against the firelit sky, and whispered a single spell under his breath. The stones around him blazed with light, and then the world erupted into war. The battle for Aveline began in thunder and fire. The old sanctuary, once silent as a tomb, now roared with magic. Spells tore through the air in bursts of color. The ground shuddered beneath the weight of enchantments cast by dozens of wands. The scent of smoke and stone filled the night as the wards cracked, fractured, and flared again under the force of the assault. Hermione and Harry moved together, side by side through the chaos. Their spells wove like ribbons of light, deflecting, striking, shielding. The runes carved into the walls pulsed faintly with each incantation, lending their strength to the fight, but the air itself screamed beneath the pressure of it all. "Up there!" Harry shouted, pointing to the ridge beyond the courtyard, where figures in black cloaks appeared. Hermione aimed and sent a blazing jet of blue light through the darkness. It struck true, sending 2 Death Eaters tumbling backward. Another flash answered hers, green this time, and the air between them burned. "Keep moving!" she cried. Behind them, Ron fought near the gate, his face streaked with dirt and determination. Draco was beside him, his spells sharp and precise, his pale hair dishevelled, but his focus unbroken. The sight was surreal. Malfoy fighting shoulder to shoulder with Ron Weasley. But in that moment, bloodlines and grudges no longer mattered. Only survival did. From the far edge of the ruins, Voldemort's voice rang out, cold, high and utterly sure. "You cannot hide from me, Potter. The age of mercy is done." Hermione's blood ran cold. She turned toward the sound, and there he was, emerging from the smoke, the pale fire of his eyes visible even through the storm of spells. The wards of Aveline shimmered faintly before him, faltering as though afraid. Harry stepped forward, wand raised. "Then come and end it." Hermione caught his arm. "Harry, I have to," he said quietly. "You know I do." She hesitated, her eyes glistening. "Then I'm coming with you." Before he could argue, she was already moving. Together they climbed the broken steps toward the upper court where Voldemort waited, the world falling away behind them in noise and flame. Draco saw them go. For an instant, something fierce flashed in his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. Then he turned back to the battle, rallying those still standing. "Hold the line," he shouted. "Keep them from the hall." Ron glanced at him, panting. "Never thought I'd see the day I'd be taking orders from you." "Then consider it your lucky night," Draco said grimly, and fired another spell. The Death Eaters pressed harder. The sanctuary's arches glowed red from the heat of the curses that struck them. The ancient magic of the place screamed like something alive, fighting back with every pulse of light. But cracks were spreading through the stone, the wards buckling under the endless assault. Meanwhile, at the upper court, Harry and Hermione faced Voldemort alone. The Dark Lord stood at the heart of the ruin, his robes billowing like shadow itself. The air around him seemed to twist and warp, as if the world recoiled from his presence. His wand gleamed with deadly precision as he raised it, eyes burning crimson. "You've run long enough," he hissed. "Your death will be the lesson that breaks the last of them." Harry's voice did not waver. "You've already lost. The moment people stopped fearing you, you were finished." Voldemort laughed, a sound that chilled Hermione to her bones. "Still clinging to hope, Potter, even now." Hermione stepped forward, wand steady. "Hope is what you'll never understand." Voldemort's gaze flicked toward her, venomous. "The mudblood thinks she can lecture me." His spell came fast, green and bright. Hermione dove aside. The curse struck the stone behind her, exploding in shards. She rolled to her feet, firing back a stunner that splashed harmlessly against his shield. Harry circled to the left, eyes locked on Voldemort's wand. Sparks rained between them as spells collided, red, green and gold in blinding bursts. The air trembled under the force of their duel. Hermione joined him, her spells striking in rhythm with his. Together, their magic formed a storm of light that pushed Voldemort back, if only for a heartbeat. "Fools," he snarled. "You think two children can undo what death itself could not?" Then he struck again, and this time the world exploded in sound. The wards of Aveline shattered. The shockwave rippled through the ruins, knocking everyone to their knees. Stones cracked, arches collapsed, and the sky above filled with blinding white light. Down below, Draco saw it happen. He stumbled, clutching the side of a fallen column. Dust filled the air. He could barely see, barely breathe, But through the haze he glimpsed Hermione and Harry high above, two figures still standing in the glare of Voldemort's wrath. Without thinking, he ran toward them. The path was chaos, fallen stone, burning debris, the clash of spells ringing in his ears. He climbed, slipping on the rubble, until at last he reached the steps. A blast of magic threw him back, but he caught himself, his hand bloodied against the stone. At the top, Hermione turned. Her eyes widened. "Draco! No!" Voldemort spun toward the new arrival, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Ah, the traitor son." Draco raised his wand. "You don't get to touch her." The Dark Lord's expression twisted in mockery. "And what will you do, boy? Defy me a second time? Watch me." For an instant, the world froze. Then Draco moved. His spell flared white, colliding with Voldemort's green curse mid-air. The explosion tore the ground apart, hurling them all backward. Hermione hit the stone hard, her breath knocked out. When her vision cleared, she saw Draco sprawled across the steps, smoke rising from his wand hand. "Draco!" she cried, crawling toward him. He coughed, blood staining his lips. Still alive, somehow. Voldemort rose from the dust, fury burning in every line of him. "Enough!" he roared. "You will die together, and the world will forget you ever defied me." Harry, barely standing, raised his wand one final time. "You're wrong. The world will remember." Hermione reached for Draco's hand. Their fingers met, trembling, and the warmth of that touch filled her with something fierce and bright. "Together," she whispered. Light erupted. It burst from the stones, from the runes carved into the very walls of Aveline, from every wand raised in defiance below. The sanctuary itself awakened, its ancient magic surging one last time. The ground glowed gold, the air alive with power. Voldemort's curse struck the light and shattered. The shockwave tore through the valley. When it faded, silence fell. The storm was gone. The fire had burned itself out, and Voldemort was nowhere to be seen. Hermione opened her eyes to the faint light of dawn. The ruins were still. Harry knelt nearby, pale but breathing. Ron stumbled toward them from the courtyard, shouting their names. She turned. Draco lay beside her, his eyes half closed. "You did it," she whispered. He managed the faintest smile. "We did." His hand found hers again, warm against the cold stone. Around them, the light of morning crept through the broken arches, painting the world gold once more. The war was over. And as the first birds began to sing beyond the ruins of Aveline, Hermione Granger looked down at the boy who had once been her enemy and saw not the mark of a Malfoy, but the courage of someone who had finally found redemption. The sun rose on a world reborn.